They say that life is full of unexpected twists and turns, but nothing could have prepared me for the gut-wrenching revelation that was about to shatter my world. I was once a man who believed in the sanctity of marriage, in the vows we take, and the promises we make. My name is David, and for 15 years I had been married to Lisa, a woman who I thought was my partner, my confidant, the love of my life. Together, we built a life in a quaint suburb outside of Denver, raising 2 kids, Joshua, who just turned 14, and Emily, 11. We had our share of ups and downs, but who doesn't? I was a good husband, or so I thought. I worked hard as an accountant at a mid-sized firm, while Lisa stayed home after the kids were born, her hands full with their upbringing and the household chores. I never questioned her dedication to our family, never doubted her love for me. That was my first mistake. It started as a nagging feeling, a small voice in the back of my mind that I tried to ignore. Lisa had been acting strange for the past few months. More distant, more irritable. At first, I chalked it up to the stresses of everyday life, raising 2 kids, managing the house, and dealing with the monotony that sometimes sets in after years of marriage. But there was something more, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. I noticed she was spending more time on her phone, smiling at messages she wouldn't share, and making excuses to leave the house at odd hours. Our sex life, once a vibrant part of our marriage, had dwindled to almost nothing. She was always too tired, too stressed, or just not in the mood. I tried to be understanding, to give her space, but the distance between us kept growing. One night, after a long day at work, I came home to find Lisa laughing on the phone with someone. When she saw me, she quickly ended the call and slipped the phone into her pocket. It was a small thing, but it gnawed at me. Who was she talking to? Why was she so secretive? I didn't want to be the jealous husband, the kind who snoops around and makes accusations, but the doubt was like a splinter in my mind, festering and growing. I tried to push it aside, to trust her, but the signs were there, and they were becoming impossible to ignore. Then there was the issue with our friends. We used to go out with other couples, have dinner parties, or just enjoy a night out. But Lisa started declining invitations, making excuses to stay home or go out alone. She would tell me she was meeting an old friend or running errands, but she always seemed to come back later than expected, often with a vague explanation that didn't quite add up. I would ask her about her day, and she would give me short, dismissive answers, as if she couldn't be bothered to share her life with me anymore. One evening, while she was in the shower, I noticed her phone buzzing on the nightstand. My heart raced as I saw a message from someone named Mark flash across the screen. I'd never heard of a Mark before. The message read, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. I'll bring the wine." My blood ran cold. This was it. The moment when my suspicions solidified into something real, something I couldn't ignore. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen, the weight of the message pressing down on me like a ton of bricks. I knew I needed to see more, to confirm what I was dreading. But at the same time, I didn't want to know. Ignorance, they say, is bliss, and a part of me wanted to hold on to the illusion that everything was fine, that Lisa was still the woman I married, the mother of my children, the person I thought I knew. But I couldn't unsee the message, couldn't unfeel the sinking sensation in my gut. I had to know the truth, no matter how much it would hurt. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and suspicion. I watched Lisa more closely, noticed how she seemed to glow whenever she received a text, how she was more meticulous about her appearance before she left the house. I started to question everything, every late-night grocery run, every sudden meeting with a friend. I felt like I was losing my mind, caught in a whirlwind of doubt and fear. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but I needed proof. I couldn't accuse her of something this serious without solid evidence, something undeniable. So, I did what I never thought I would do. I became the snooping husband. While Lisa was asleep, I went through her phone, her messages, her emails. What I found made my blood boil. There were messages from Mark, dozens of them. Flirty, intimate, disgusting messages that no married woman should ever exchange with another man. They talked about their secret meetings, the passionate kisses, the plans they were making behind my back. I felt like I was going to be sick. I had to sit down, my head spinning with the enormity of what I had discovered. My wife was cheating on me. After 15 years of marriage, of building a life together, She was betraying me with some asshole named Mark. The world as I knew it was crumbling around me, and I didn't know what to do, how to react. Part of me wanted to storm into the bedroom and scream at her, demand answers, and throw her out of the house. Another part of me was paralyzed with shock, unable to process the betrayal that had just been laid bare. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare, one I couldn't wake up from. The woman I had loved, trusted, and devoted my life to had stabbed me in the back. How could she do this to me, to our kids? The anger started to bubble up inside me, mixing with the hurt and the sadness, creating a toxic cocktail of emotions that I didn't know how to handle. I knew I had to confront her to get to the bottom of this, but I also knew that nothing would ever be the same again. And so, the first act of this tragic play was set. I was a man betrayed, standing on the precipice of a confrontation that would change everything. The life I thought I knew was gone, replaced by a dark, uncertain future. But one thing was certain. I was going to find out the truth, no matter what it cost me. The days that followed were a haze of anger, sorrow, and dread. Every time I looked at Lisa, I saw the betrayal that lay beneath her smile, beneath her every word. It was all a facade, a sickening lie that she was hiding behind. I could hardly stand to be in the same room as her, knowing what I knew. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus on anything other than the images playing in my mind, the images of her with him. The messages I had found left little to the imagination. They were graphic, explicit, and filled with the kind of passion that I hadn't felt from Lisa in years. It was like a knife twisting in my gut every time I thought about it. But I needed more than just those messages. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I had to catch them in the act, to witness the betrayal firsthand, as painful as it would be. I wanted to confront her in the moment, to see the look on her face when she realized that her secret life was over. The thought of that moment, of seeing her crumble under the weight of her lies, gave me a twisted sense of satisfaction. It was the only thing that kept me going. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Lisa had told me she was going out for a girls' night with her friend Karen, one of her usual excuses. But I knew better now. I'd seen the messages. She wasn't meeting Karen. She was meeting Mark. My heart pounded in my chest as I told her to have a good time, forcing a smile as she kissed me goodbye. She looked so happy, so carefree, and it made me sick. How could she look at me like that, knowing what she was about to do? How could she lie to my face so effortlessly? As soon as she left, I grabbed my keys and followed her. I kept my distance, not wanting to tip her off. My mind was racing with thoughts of what I might find, of how I would react when I finally caught them. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but the anger boiling inside me told me that it wasn't going to be pretty. I tailed her car for miles until she pulled into the parking lot of a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. It was the kind of place where people go to do things they don't want anyone else to know about. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I parked a few spaces away and watched as she got out of the car, looking around nervously before heading inside. A few minutes later, another car pulled up. I didn't recognize it, but I knew who it belonged to. A tall man with dark hair and a cocky grin stepped out. Mark. This was the man who had been fucking my wife, who had been taking from me what was supposed to be mine. I watched as he followed her inside, not even bothering to hide the lust in his eyes. It was like they didn't care who saw them, like they were so caught up in their little affair that nothing else mattered. I sat in the car for what felt like an eternity, my heart pounding, my mind screaming at me to do something. The longer I waited, the angrier I became. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to see it, to know for sure. I got out of the car and walked toward the motel, my hands shaking with rage. I knew what I was about to see, but that didn't make it any easier. I found the room easily enough. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear them inside. My blood boiled as I heard Lisa's voice, soft and breathy, saying things she hadn't said to me in years. The kind of things that used to be ours. I pushed the door open slowly, my heart hammering in my chest. They didn't hear me come in. They were too busy with each other, too lost in their sordid little world to notice that it was all about to come crashing down. The sight that greeted me was one that would be burned into my memory forever. There they were, on the bed, tangled in the sheets, their bodies pressed together in a way that made me want to vomit. Lisa's eyes were closed, her face twisted in pleasure, and Mark was above her, his hands all over her, his lips trailing down her neck. They were so caught up in their lust that they didn't even notice me standing there watching them. For a moment, I was frozen, unable to move, unable to process the reality of what I was seeing. But then something inside me snapped. All the anger, all the pain, all the betrayal that had been building up inside me came flooding out in a white-hot rage. I let out a roar of fury, and before either of them could react, I was across the room. I grabbed Mark by the back of his neck and yanked him off Lisa, throwing him onto the floor with a force that surprised even me. He landed with a thud, his eyes wide with shock and fear as he looked up at me. Lisa screamed, scrambling to cover herself with the sheets, her face pale as she realized what was happening. "What the fuck is this?" I bellowed, my voice shaking with fury. I could barely see straight, my vision clouded by the rage that was coursing through me. Mark tried to get up, but I was on him in an instant. I grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the wall, my fists clenched so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. He was bigger than me, stronger. But in that moment, I didn't care. I had years of pent-up anger fueling me, and I wasn't about to let this piece of shit get away with what he had done. "You think you can fuck my wife and get away with it?" I snarled, my face inches from his. "You think you can just waltz into my life and take what's mine?" Mark tried to speak, tried to explain, but I wasn't interested in anything he had to say. I pulled back my fist and punched him square in the face. The impact sent a shockwave of pain up my arm, but I didn't care. The satisfaction of seeing him reel back, blood pouring from his nose, was worth it. I hit him again, and again, each punch fueled by the images of him with Lisa, by the betrayal that had torn my life apart. "David, stop! Please, stop!" Lisa's voice cut through the haze of my rage, but I barely heard her. I was too focused on Mark, too consumed by the need to make him pay for what he had done. But she was pulling at me, her hands grabbing at my arms, her voice pleading, desperate. "You're going to kill him! Please, stop!" I paused, my fist raised, breathing heavily as I looked down at Mark. He was a mess, his face bloodied and bruised, his eyes swollen shut. He wasn't fighting back anymore, just lying there, groaning in pain. Part of me wanted to keep going, to beat him, until there was nothing left of the smug asshole who had taken my wife from me. But another part of me, the part that still had some sense of control, knew that I had to stop. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about everything I had lost, everything that had been stolen from me. Beating him to death wouldn't bring any of that back. I let go of him, my hands trembling as I backed away, trying to catch my breath. Lisa was crying now, her face a mess of tears and fear. She looked at me like I was a monster, like she didn't even recognize me. But she was the one who had turned me into this, the one who had made me do this. I had been a good husband, a good father, and she had thrown it all away for this bastard. "What have you done?" she sobbed, her voice choked with emotion. "What the hell have you done?" "What have I done?" I spat, my voice dripping with venom. "What have I done? You're asking me that? After what you've been doing behind my back? After what you've done to us?" She didn't have an answer for that. She just stood there sobbing, her hands covering her face as if she could block out the reality of what had happened. I looked at her, the woman I had once loved, and all I felt was disgust. She was a stranger to me now, a liar, a cheat, a bitch who had destroyed everything we had built together. I looked back at Mark, who was struggling to get to his feet, his face a bloody mess. He wasn't smiling now. There was no cocky grin, no trace of the man who had walked into that motel room so confidently. He was just a broken, beaten shell of a man, and he deserved every bit of it. "You better hope I never see you again," I growled, my voice low and menacing. "Because if I do, I'll finish what I started." He didn't say anything. He just nodded weakly, wiping the blood from his mouth as he staggered toward the door. Lisa didn't try to stop him, didn't even look at him as he left. She was too busy crying, too consumed by her own guilt and shame. As the door closed behind him, I felt a strange sense of emptiness settle over me. The anger, the rage, it was all gone, leaving behind a hollow void that I didn't know how to fill. I had done what I came to do, but it didn't help. The motel room felt like a tomb after Mark left, the air thick with tension and the lingering scent of sweat and shame. Lisa stood there, clutching the sheets to her chest, her face streaked with tears. She looked so small, so pathetic, compared to the image of the woman I had once loved. But there was no pity left in me, no sympathy. The woman standing before me was nothing more than a stranger who had torn my life apart. I took a step toward her, and she flinched, her body trembling as if she expected me to lash out again. But I didn't. The anger that had fueled me earlier had drained away, leaving me cold, empty, and numb. I needed answers, not violence. I needed to understand why she had done this, why she had destroyed everything we had built together. I needed to hear it from her own mouth, to make her face the reality of what she had done. Why, Lisa? My voice was cold, almost devoid of emotion. Why him? Why this? Why the lies? You owe me that much. She didn't answer right away. She just stared at me, her eyes wide with fear and guilt, as if she couldn't quite comprehend the situation. I could see the wheels turning in her head, the desperation in her eyes as she tried to figure out what to say, how to spin the situation. But there was no spinning this, no twisting it into something that would absolve her of responsibility. David, I'm sorry, she finally whispered, her voice shaking. I never wanted this to happen. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Didn't mean for it to go this far? I repeated, my voice rising with disbelief. You didn't mean to fuck him? You didn't mean to lie to me for months? How the hell do you not mean for something like that to happen, Lisa? She winced at my words, tears streaming down her cheeks as she tried to hold on to the sheets that were slipping from her grasp. It wasn't supposed to be like this, she sobbed. I was lonely, David. You were always working, always busy. I felt like you didn't care about me anymore, like I wasn't important to you. Her words hit me like a slap to the face, but they didn't carry the weight she intended. They were excuses, weak, hollow excuses for her betrayal. We all get lonely, we all have our struggles, but that doesn't give us the right to destroy our families, to betray the people who love us. So this is my fault then? I asked, my voice laced with sarcasm. You cheated on me because I was working to support our family? Because I was trying to provide for you and the kids? No, that's not what I'm saying, she cried, her voice desperate. I know it's not your fault, but I needed something, David. I needed to feel wanted again, to feel like I mattered. Mark made me feel that way. He made me feel alive. Alive? The word felt bitter on my tongue, a mockery of the life we had shared. So fucking another man made you feel alive? Was that worth it, Lisa? Was it worth tearing our family apart? She couldn't look me in the eye. Her gaze dropped to the floor, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I could see the guilt eating away at her, but it wasn't enough. Nothing she could say, nothing she could do, would ever be enough to undo the damage she had caused. I didn't want to hurt you, David, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't want to hurt the kids. I got lost. I lost sight of what we had. The anger flared up again, hot and uncontrollable. Lost sight? You didn't lose sight, Lisa. You threw it away. You chose this, every step of the way. You chose to lie to me, to betray me, to fuck that piece of shit behind my back. Don't pretend like you didn't have a choice. She crumpled under the weight of my words, collapsing onto the bed as if her legs couldn't support her anymore. Her sobs grew louder, more frantic, as she buried her face in the sheets. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I needed her to understand, to face the full consequences of what she had done. You think crying is going to fix this? I demanded, my voice harsh. You think saying you're sorry is going to make everything better? Do you have any idea what you've done? What you've destroyed? Please, David, I'm begging you, she choked out between sobs. I'll do anything. Just, please don't leave me. Don't take the kids away from me. The mention of the kids struck a nerve. I thought of Joshua and Emily at home, unaware of the storm that was tearing their family apart. They were innocent in all of this, but they were the ones who would suffer the most. The thought of them growing up in a broken home, dealing with the fallout of their mother's betrayal, filled me with a deep, overwhelming sadness. I should leave you, I said, my voice cold and unyielding. I should take the kids and walk out that door and never look back. That's what you deserve, Lisa. But this isn't just about you. This is about them. about what's best for them. She looked up at me, hope flickering in her tear-streaked eyes. I can make it right, David. I swear I can. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. To fix us. Just give me a chance. A chance? I scoffed, shaking my head. You've had plenty of chances, Lisa. And you've blown every single one of them. You don't get to ask for another chance now. Not after what you've done. Please, David, I love you, she cried, reaching out to me with trembling hands. I love you so much, and I love our family. I know I fucked up, but I can fix it. I can make things right. I backed away from her, my hands raised as if to ward off her touch. The words she was saying, the promises she was making, they meant nothing to me now. They were just empty words from a woman who had proven that she couldn't be trusted. You love me? I repeated, my voice filled with bitter disbelief. You don't even know what love is, Lisa. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. If you loved our family, you wouldn't have torn it apart for some cheap thrill. Her hands dropped to her sides, and she stared at me, her eyes wide with desperation. I was stupid, David. I was weak. But I can be better. I can be the wife you deserve, the mother our kids need. Just don't give up on us. Please. I stood there, staring down at her, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. Part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to cling to the hope that we could somehow salvage what was left of our marriage. But the other part of me, the part that had seen the messages, that had watched her with Mark, knew better. Trust, once broken, is almost impossible to rebuild, and Lisa had shattered it beyond repair. You think you can just say you're sorry, and we'll go back to the way things were? I asked, my voice low and harsh. You think we can just pretend this never happened? No, she whispered, her voice trembling. I know we can't go back, but we can move forward. We can rebuild together. I shook my head, the weight of everything pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. You've destroyed everything, Lisa. There's nothing left to rebuild. The reality of my words seemed to hit her like a physical blow, and she crumpled onto the bed, sobbing uncontrollably. But I couldn't comfort her. I couldn't bring myself to offer her even the smallest bit of solace. The woman I had loved was gone, replaced by this broken, desperate shell. I'll talk to a lawyer, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. We'll figure out the custody arrangements and we'll go from there. David, no, she cried, reaching out to me again. Please don't do this. Don't leave me. I'll do anything. Just tell me what to do. But I was already walking toward the door, my mind made up. There was nothing left to say, nothing that could change the outcome. Lisa had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. As I reached the door, I turned back to look at her one last time. She was still sobbing, still begging, but I felt nothing. The love I had once felt for her was dead, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. You did this, Lisa, I said, my voice steady. You destroyed us. And with that, I walked out the door, leaving her behind. The moment I stepped out of that motel room, I felt a strange sense of relief, as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. But the relief was quickly overshadowed by a deep, gnawing sadness. My marriage was over, my family was broken, and there was no going back. I got into my car and drove away. The image of Lisa's tear-streaked face burned into my mind. But I didn't look back. I couldn't. There was nothing left for me there. All I had now was the road ahead, uncertain and filled with challenges. But it was the only path left to me. Driving away from that motel was like leaving behind a part of myself, the part that had believed in love, trust, and the sanctity of marriage. The pain of betrayal was still fresh, raw, gnawing at my insides like a festering wound. But I knew I had to keep moving forward. There was no going back, no undoing what had been done. The life I had known was over, and it was time to confront that reality head-on. The first thing I did was call my best friend, Matt. He had been my closest confidant for years, someone I could trust with anything. I knew I needed to tell him what had happened, if only to have someone else share the burden of this devastating secret. When he answered, his voice was casual, relaxed, the way it always was. Hey, Dave, what's up? He asked, probably expecting the usual banter about work or sports. But my tone must have given something away because his voice shifted immediately when he heard me speak. "Matt, I need to talk to you. It's serious," I said, my voice hoarse with the weight of the words I was about to say. "Jesus, man, what happened?" he asked, his concern palpable through the phone. I took a deep breath, gripping the steering wheel as I drove. "Lisa's been cheating on me. I caught her in the act with some asshole named Mark." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, the silence heavy and oppressive. "Are you fucking kidding me?" Matt finally said, disbelief and anger mixing in his voice. "I wish I was," I replied bitterly. "I found messages on her phone a few days ago. I followed her to a motel tonight and, well, I caught them together. It's over, Matt. My marriage is over." Holy shit, Dave, I don't even know what to say. That bitch. How could she do that to you? To the kids? His voice was filled with the same anger that had been burning in me for days. "I don't know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm going to make sure everyone knows what she did. She's not going to get away with this." Matt didn't hesitate. "Damn right. You want me to come over? We can figure out what to do next." "Yeah, I think I need that," I admitted, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. "I'm heading home now. I'll see you there." After hanging up, I drove in silence, my mind racing with thoughts of what I needed to do next. Lisa had destroyed our marriage, our family, and she wasn't going to walk away from this unscathed. I was going to make sure everyone knew the truth. Our friends, our family, everyone who had ever looked up to us as the perfect couple. The idea of exposing her filled me with a grim satisfaction. It was the only power I had left, the only way to reclaim some control over the wreckage of my life. When I got home, the house was dark and quiet. Joshua and Emily were asleep, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to hit their lives. The thought of them waking up to this nightmare tore at my heart, but I knew I had to do what was right, even if it meant turning their world upside down. Matt showed up not long after I got home, his face a mask of concern and anger. He didn't say much as he walked in, just gave me a firm handshake and a look that said he was there for whatever I needed. We sat down in the living room, the silence between us heavy with unspoken thoughts. "Are you sure about this?" Matt asked finally, his voice cautious. "You're going to tell everyone?" "Yeah," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not going to let her get away with this, Matt. She's been lying to me, to everyone, for God knows how long. People deserve to know what she really is." He nodded slowly, understanding. "All right, but just be sure you're ready for the fallout. This is going to blow up everything." "I know," I replied, a sense of grim determination settling over me. "But she did this, not me. She destroyed our family, and I'm not going to keep her secrets for her." Matt didn't argue. He just nodded, his expression resolute. "All right then. Let's do it." We started with our closest friends, the ones who had been with us through thick and thin, who had celebrated our anniversaries and shared in our joys and struggles. These were people who had known Lisa and me as a couple, who had believed in the strength of our marriage. They deserved to know the truth, no matter how ugly it was. I called each of them, one by one, my heart heavy with the burden of what I was about to say. Each conversation was like ripping off a bandage, exposing the raw wound beneath. There was shock, disbelief, and anger. Anger at Lisa, at the betrayal she had committed, and at the destruction she had wrought. "I can't believe it, Dave," said Sarah, one of Lisa's oldest friends. "How could she do this? I always thought you two were so happy." "Yeah, well, I thought so too," I replied bitterly. "But I guess I was wrong." Sarah's voice was shaky with emotion. "What are you going to do?" "I'm filing for divorce," I said firmly. "I'm not going to stay married to someone who could do this. She's going to pay for what she's done, one way or another." There were similar reactions from our other friends. Shock, sadness, and a deep sense of betrayal. Some of them even apologized to me, as if they felt guilty for not seeing the signs, for not realizing what was happening right under their noses. But it wasn't just our friends I needed to tell. My parents, Lisa's parents, our siblings, they all needed to know. They had been part of our lives, part of the family we had built together. This was going to shatter their image of us, of the life we had shared. But it had to be done. I called my parents first, knowing it would be one of the hardest conversations I would ever have. My mother answered, her voice warm and cheerful. "Hi, David. How are you, sweetheart?" "Mom," I said, my voice breaking. I need to tell you something. Something bad." There was a pause on the other end of the line, the cheerful tone disappearing from her voice. "David, what is it? What's wrong?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Lisa's been cheating on me, Mom. I found out tonight. It's over. Our marriage is over." The silence that followed was deafening, the kind that stretches on for eternity. When my mother finally spoke, her voice was trembling with emotion. "Oh my God, David, I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. How could she do this? After all these years." "I don't know," I replied, the weight of the conversation pressing down on me. "But I'm not going to let her get away with it. I'm going to tell everyone. I need people to know the truth." "Of course, David," she said, her voice filled with sadness and support. "Whatever you need to do, we're here for you. Your father and I will support you every step of the way." I thanked her, trying to keep the tears at bay as I hung up the phone. My father called me back later that night, offering his own words of support and reassurance. I could hear the anger in his voice, the protective instinct that made him want to shield me from the pain, but there was nothing he could do to make this better. This was a wound that would take a long time to heal if it ever did. Next, I called Lisa's parents. This was a conversation I dreaded, knowing how much they loved her, how they had always seen us as the perfect couple. But they had to know. They deserved to know. Her mother answered the phone, her voice soft and kind as always. "David, what a surprise. How are you?" "Not good, Mrs. Harper," I said, my voice heavy with the weight of what I was about to say. "There's something I need to tell you. Something about Lisa." There was a pause, a moment of silence before she spoke again, her voice filled with concern. "What is it, David? What's wrong?" I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "Lisa's been having an affair. I found out tonight. It's over between us. I'm filing for divorce." The gasp on the other end of the line was sharp, like the sound of a heart breaking. "Oh, David, no, this can't be true. Not Lisa. She would never do that." "I wish it wasn't true, but it is," I replied, the bitterness creeping back into my voice. "I caught her in the act tonight. There's no denying it." Her mother started crying, the sound of it tugging at my heartstrings. Despite everything, I didn't want to hurt them, but I couldn't protect Lisa from the consequences of her actions. Her father got on the phone next, his voice stern but shaken. "I can't believe this," he said, his voice filled with disbelief. "Lisa, our Lisa? How could she do this to you, to the kids?" "I don't know, Mr. Harper," I said, my voice hollow. "But it's done. I'm not going to hide it. People deserve to know what she's done." "We'll talk to her," he said, his voice firm. "This isn't the Lisa we raised. She needs to face what she's done." After that, the rest of the calls were easier, but no less painful. Each conversation was a reminder of the life I had lost, of the betrayal that had shattered my world. The word spread quickly, like wildfire. Friends, family, acquaintances, they all knew within hours. My phone blew up with messages of support, of sympathy, but they did little to ease the pain. The only comfort I found was in knowing that I had exposed her, that I had taken control of the narrative. Lisa couldn't hide from what she had done, not anymore. That night, Lisa came home, her face pale and tear-streaked, the weight of the day's events etched into every line of her expression. She must have known by now that I had told everyone that there was no going back. She walked into the living room, her eyes filled with a mix of guilt and desperation. "David," she began, her voice trembling, I heard that you've been telling people." "Yeah, I have," I interrupted, my voice cold and detached. "They deserve to know the truth, Lisa. I'm not going to protect you from this. You made your bed. Now you can lie in it." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she reached out toward me. But I stepped back, the distance between us more than just physical. "David, please," she begged, her voice cracking. "Don't do this. Don't tear our family apart." I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and devoid of humor. "You're the one who tore it apart, Lisa. I'm just making sure everyone knows it." She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing into her hands, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. The woman I had loved was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize, someone who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. "There's no fixing this," I said, my voice final. "You destroyed everything, and now you have to live with the consequences. Everyone knows who you really are now, Lisa. You can't hide from it." She didn't respond, just sat there, broken and defeated, as I turned and walked out of the room. There was nothing left to say, nothing that could undo the damage that had been done. My marriage was over, my family was shattered, and all that remained was the wreckage of what once was. As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, I realized that the road ahead was going to be long and painful. But at least now, the truth was out in the open. Lisa would have to face the judgment of everyone who knew her, everyone who had believed in the image she had carefully crafted. There was a small comfort in that, knowing that she couldn't hide from the consequences of her actions. But it was a hollow victory, one that did little to ease the pain. I lay down in the bed that we had once shared, staring up at the ceiling, wondering how I would ever put the pieces of my life back together. The betrayal was still fresh, the wound still raw, but I knew that this was just the beginning of a long and painful journey. And in the quiet darkness of the night, as the house around me lay still, I could only hope that one day the pain would begin to fade. The days that followed were like living in a fog, each moment blending into the next as I tried to navigate the aftermath of Lisa's betrayal. Word had spread quickly, and the fallout was swift and brutal. Lisa's reputation was in tatters, and our once perfect life had been exposed as a lie. But despite the chaos, despite the devastation, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still unfinished business. Mark, the man who had destroyed my marriage, who had taken what was mine, was still out there, living his life without consequence. And that was something I couldn't accept. I couldn't stop thinking about him, about the smug look on his face when I had caught him with Lisa. The memory of it made my blood boil, filling me with a rage that wouldn't be satisfied until I had made him pay. Beating him up in that motel room had been a start, but it wasn't enough. He had to suffer, to feel the same pain that I had felt. He needed to understand that there were consequences for his actions, that he couldn't just walk away from this unscathed. I started by doing some research. It didn't take long to dig up information on Mark. His last name was Jensen, and he worked as a mid-level manager at a tech company downtown. He was well-liked at work, known for his charisma and charm, qualities that had clearly helped him worm his way into my wife's bed. But beneath that polished exterior, he was nothing more than a coward and a liar. A man who had no respect for the sanctity of marriage, no respect for me, my family, or the life we had built. I wasn't content to simply let him go on with his life as if nothing had happened. No, I wanted to hit him where it hurt, to strip away the facade and expose him for the piece of shit he really was. And so, I devised a plan, a way to bring him down, to ruin his life the way he had ruined mine. The first step was to gather evidence. I needed something concrete, something that would destroy his reputation and ensure that he couldn't simply walk away from this. I knew that confronting him again wouldn't be enough. This time, I had to be smarter, more calculated. I started by digging into his social media profiles, looking for anything that might be useful. It was easy enough. His accounts were public, filled with pictures of him at work events, out with friends, even at family gatherings. But as I scrolled through his posts, I noticed something interesting. He was married. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. His wife's name was Allison, and they had a young daughter, maybe 6 or 7 years old. The discovery filled me with a twisted sense of satisfaction. Mark was just like Lisa, a liar, a cheat, a hypocrite. And now, I had something I could use against him. I started by contacting Allison. It wasn't hard to find her email address. It was linked to Mark's public profiles. I spent hours drafting and redrafting the message, trying to find the right words, the right tone. I didn't want to come across as vindictive, even though that's exactly what I was. I wanted her to know the truth, to understand what kind of man she was married to. When I finally sent the email, my heart was pounding in my chest. I kept it simple, straightforward. I told her who I was, that I had caught her husband with my wife, and that I had evidence to back up everything I was saying. I attached screenshots of the messages I had found on Lisa's phone, along with the time and location of their motel rendezvous. It wasn't just hearsay, it was undeniable proof of Mark's betrayal. I didn't expect a response right away, but when it came, it was almost immediate. Allison was devastated, her email filled with disbelief and pain. She thanked me for telling her, for showing her the truth, but it was clear that her world had just been shattered. I felt a pang of guilt, knowing that I had just torn apart another family. But it was fleeting. Mark deserved this, and Allison deserved to know the truth. But that was just the beginning. Next, I turned my attention to Mark's job. I knew that exposing his affair at work could have serious consequences, especially in a company that prided itself on its values and ethics. I compiled all the evidence I had, screenshots, dates, and locations, and sent it anonymously to his HR department. I knew it was a risky move, but I didn't care. This wasn't about playing it safe anymore. It was about making sure that Mark's life was turned upside down, just like mine had been. The response was swift. Within a week, rumors started circulating about Mark's sudden absence from work. He had been suspended, pending an investigation. The satisfaction I felt was like a balm to my wounded pride. He was finally facing the consequences of his actions, finally feeling the pressure of the truth closing in on him. But I wasn't done yet. The final blow came when I decided to confront him one last time, to see the damage I had caused, to revel in the wreckage of his life. I knew where he lived, another piece of information I had gleaned from my research, and I knew that his wife would be out of town that weekend, visiting her parents with their daughter. It was the perfect opportunity to confront him alone, without the risk of involving his family directly. I showed up at his house late on a Saturday night, the streets quiet and empty. My heart was pounding in my chest as I rang the doorbell, a mix of anticipation and adrenaline coursing through my veins. It took a moment, but eventually I heard footsteps on the other side of the door. When it opened, Mark stood there, his face pale and drawn, the cocky grin long gone. He didn't say anything at first, just stared at me, his eyes wide with fear and recognition. I could see the toll the last few days had taken on him. He looked like a man on the edge, like someone who had just had his entire life ripped out from under him. "David," he started, his voice shaking. "What are you doing here?" I didn't waste any time. I stepped forward, forcing him to back up into the foyer, my presence towering over him like a dark shadow. "You know exactly why I'm here," I said, my voice low and menacing. "I wanted to see what's left of the man who thought he could fuck my wife and get away with it." Mark swallowed hard, his eyes darting around as if looking for an escape. But there was none. He was cornered, and he knew it. "Look, David, I'm sorry," he stammered, his voice trembling. "I never meant for things to go this far. I made a mistake, okay? I know that." "Mistake?" I hissed, my anger flaring up again. "A mistake is forgetting your anniversary. What you did was deliberate, calculated. You didn't just make a mistake, Mark, you made a choice. And now you're going to live with the consequences." He started to protest, to make excuses, but I wasn't interested in hearing any of it. I took another step toward him, my fists clenched at my sides. "You ruined my life, Mark. You ruined my family. Did you really think I'd just let you walk away from this?" "David, please," he begged, his voice cracking with desperation. "I've lost everything already. My job, my family. I'm sorry, I really am." "Sorry doesn't cut it," I growled, my voice dripping with venom. "You didn't care about what you were doing when you were fucking my wife. You didn't care about the damage you were causing. Well, now it's your turn to feel the pain." He looked at me, his eyes filled with fear and regret. "What are you going to do?" I let out a bitter laugh, the sound echoing through the empty house. "I've already done it, Mark. Your wife knows. Your company knows. Everyone knows who you really are. You wanted to destroy my life? Well, congratulations, you've done it. But now I've destroyed yours too." The realization of what I had done seemed to hit him like a ton of bricks, and he crumpled to the floor, his head in his hands. "God, no! What have I done?" I stood over him, looking down at the broken man who had once been so sure of himself, so confident in his ability to take what he wanted without consequence. The satisfaction I felt was cold, but it was there, filling the void left by the betrayal and the pain. "You brought this on yourself," I said, my voice cold and final. This is what happens when you destroy someone's life. You don't get to just walk away. With that, I turned and walked out of the house, leaving Mark to the wreckage of his life. The night air was cool against my skin as I stepped outside. The quiet streets a stark contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded inside. As I drove away, I felt a strange sense of closure. Mark had been dealt with, his life turned upside down just as he had done to mine. But as the adrenaline began to fade, I was left with the cold, hard reality of what had just happened. I had taken my revenge, but it hadn't brought me the peace I'd hoped for. The pain was still there, the loss still fresh, and I knew that no amount of retribution could ever truly heal the wounds that had been inflicted. The day after my final confrontation with Mark, the reality of everything that had happened began to settle in. The anger that had driven me for so long was starting to fade, replaced by a heavy, crushing sense of emptiness. I had taken my revenge on Mark, exposed Lisa's betrayal to everyone, and now there was nothing left but the wreckage of our marriage. The time had come to face the inevitable, to have the conversation that would mark the official end of everything we had once shared. Lisa had been a ghost around the house since I told everyone about the affair. She avoided me as much as possible, retreating to the guest room, leaving only to care for the kids or run errands. The house was filled with an oppressive silence, the kind that hangs heavy in the air, suffocating any attempt at normalcy. Joshua and Emily had noticed the tension, of course, but we hadn't told them the full story yet. That was a conversation I was dreading, but one that would have to come soon enough. I knew I couldn't put it off any longer. I had to talk to Lisa about the divorce, about what our future, if you could even call it that, was going to look like. There was no saving our marriage, no going back to the way things were. That much was clear, but we had to figure out how to move forward, how to separate our lives while still being there for the kids. It was late in the evening when I finally worked up the courage to talk to her. The kids were in their rooms, winding down for the night, and the house was quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I found Lisa sitting in the living room, staring blankly at the TV, though I doubted she was really watching it. She looked tired, worn down by the events of the past few days, and part of me, despite everything, felt a twinge of pity for her. But I quickly pushed that feeling aside. This wasn't the time for pity. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her, gathering my thoughts. She must have sensed me there because she turned her head slightly, her eyes dull and lifeless as they met mine. "David," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What is it?" "We need to talk," I said, stepping into the room and taking a seat across from her. The distance between us felt vast, like we were two strangers meeting for the first time. She nodded slowly, as if she had been expecting this, as if she had known all along that this conversation was inevitable. "I know." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "This marriage is over, Lisa. There's no coming back from what you did." "I'm filing for divorce." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and final. For a moment she didn't say anything, just stared at me with those tired eyes, her hands clenched in her lap. Then she let out a long, shaky breath, as if she had been holding it in for days. "I know," she said again, her voice cracking slightly. "I knew it was coming. I don't know. I guess I hoped." "There's nothing left to hope for," I interrupted, my tone sharper than I intended. "You destroyed everything, Lisa. The trust, the love, the life we built together, it's all gone." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't try to stop them this time. They spilled over, rolling down her cheeks as she looked at me, her expression filled with a mixture of regret and sorrow. "David, I'm so sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am. I never wanted to hurt you or the kids. I don't even know why I did it." Her words, though filled with emotion, felt hollow to me. I had heard them before, so many times over the past few days, and they had lost their meaning. "Sorry isn't enough," I said quietly. "It never will be." She nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "I know. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I can forgive myself." There was a long silence between us, the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on us like a physical force. I wanted to scream at her, to rage against the unfairness of it all, but I was too tired, too drained. All I wanted now was to get through this conversation, to figure out the logistics of our separation, and to start the process of moving on. We need to talk about the divorce, I said, shifting the conversation to more practical matters. We need to figure out how we're going to do this, especially with the kids. She nodded again, though her expression was one of deep sadness. I don't want to fight you, David. I know I'm the one who messed everything up. I'll do whatever you think is best. Her willingness to cooperate caught me off guard. I had expected her to put up more of a fight, to try and negotiate for a better deal, but it seemed like she was too broken to even try. Or maybe she really did feel that guilty, that ashamed of what she had done. I think it's best if we keep things as civil as possible, I said, my voice measured. For the kids' sake, if nothing else. We need to figure out custody, and we need to divide our assets. I'll talk to my lawyer and have him draw up the papers. Of course, she whispered, her gaze dropping to the floor. I'll get a lawyer too, but I won't fight you on anything. I'll agree to whatever you want. Her words were sincere, but they didn't bring me any comfort. This wasn't a victory. There was no satisfaction in watching her concede so easily. It just felt sad, empty. What about the house? She asked after a moment, her voice trembling slightly. What do we do about that? I'd already thought about it, and the answer was clear to me. I think it's best if you and the kids stay here, at least for now. They need stability, and this is their home. I'll move out, find a place nearby so I can still be close to them. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with surprise. You're going to move out? Yes, I said firmly. It's what's best for the kids. They need to stay in their home, in their school, with as little disruption as possible. I'll make sure to find a place where they can visit whenever they want. She didn't argue, just nodded slowly, the sadness in her eyes deepening. Okay, if that's what you think is best. I do, I replied, the decision solidifying in my mind. We'll tell them together, explain what's happening, and reassure them that we'll both still be there for them. Lisa bit her lip, her eyes filling with tears again. This is going to break their hearts. I know, I said, my voice heavy with emotion. But it's better than them living in a house filled with lies and resentment. She wiped her eyes again, trying to hold herself together. David, I just want you to know that I'm sorry. For everything. I wish I could take it all back, but I can't. All I can do is try to be a better mother to our kids, and maybe one day, a better person. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the woman I had once loved, the mother of my children, the person I had shared so much of my life with. But she was also the woman who had betrayed me, who had destroyed everything we had built together. And that was something I couldn't forgive, no matter how much she regretted it. I hope you do become a better person, Lisa, I said, my voice calm but distant. For the kids' sake, if nothing else. But as for us, there's no going back. She nodded, accepting my words with a quiet resignation. I know, I'm so sorry, David. Sorry doesn't change anything, I said, the finality of it sinking in. It's over, Lisa. We sat there in silence for a long time, the weight of our decisions settling over us like a shroud. There were no more words left to say, no more arguments, no more accusations. All that was left was the painful process of unraveling the life we had once shared, of figuring out how to move forward separately, while still being there for the kids. Finally, I stood up, the conversation over, the decision made. I'll start looking for a place tomorrow, I said, my voice steady, and I'll have my lawyer contact yours. We'll figure out the details. Lisa nodded, not meeting my eyes. Okay. I turned to leave the room, but before I reached the door, I paused, looking back at her one last time. We'll tell the kids tomorrow, I said, my voice softening just a little. Together. All right, she whispered, her voice barely audible. With that, I walked out of the room, out of the life we had shared, and into the unknown. The marriage was over, the decision made, but the road ahead was still long and filled with challenges. We would have to tell the kids, figure out the logistics of our separation, and somehow learn to coexist as co-parents, if not as partners. But at least now, there was some clarity. The lies, the deceit, the anger, they were all out in the open. And while the pain was still there, sharp and unyielding, I knew that this was the first step toward healing, toward rebuilding my life in the wake of the destruction that Lisa had wrought. The road ahead would be difficult, but it was a path I had to take, for myself, for the kids, and for the chance to find peace in a world that had been turned upside down. The following morning dawned with an eerie sense of calm, a deceptive quiet before the emotional storm that was sure to come. The reality of the situation was settling in, and though the conversation with Lisa had been difficult, the hardest part was yet to come, telling the kids. How do you explain to your children that their family is breaking apart, that their parents, who they have always seen as a team, are now going their separate ways? There's no easy way to do it, no way to soften the blow. But it had to be done. Lisa and I had agreed to tell them together, to present a united front despite everything that had happened. We needed to reassure them that, despite the divorce, we were both still their parents, and we both still loved them. But even as I rehearsed the words in my mind, I knew that nothing could fully prepare me for the look of hurt and confusion that was sure to cross their faces. We decided to have the conversation after breakfast. The kids were in good spirits, laughing and chatting as if it were just another day. The sight of them, so innocent and unaware of the bombshell that was about to drop, made my heart ache. I wondered if they had noticed the tension between Lisa and me, if they had picked up on the whispered arguments and the strained silences, but they were just kids, and I wanted to shield them from the harsh realities of the adult world for as long as I could. Unfortunately, that time was up. Once the dishes were cleared and the kitchen was tidied, Lisa and I exchanged a glance, silently agreeing that it was time. We gathered Joshua and Emily in the living room, their favorite place in the house, the room where we had spent so many happy moments as a family. The kids sat on the couch, their bright eyes looking up at us expectantly, as if they were waiting for some exciting news. But this was the last thing they would have ever expected. "Mom, Dad, what's going on?" Joshua asked, a hint of concern creeping into his voice as he noticed the seriousness on our faces. I sat down on the coffee table across from them, trying to keep my voice steady. Lisa sat beside me, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them together in her lap. "Kids, your mom and I need to talk to you about something important," I began, choosing my words carefully. It's not easy to say this, but we want you to understand that we both love you very much, and that will never change." Emily's smile faded, replaced by a look of confusion. "What do you mean, Daddy? What's wrong?" Lisa took a deep breath, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your father and we've decided to separate. We're getting a divorce." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The kids stared at us, their expressions shifting from confusion to shock, and then to a deep, heartbreaking sadness. Joshua was the first to react, his eyes widening in disbelief. No, you can't," he stammered, his voice cracking. "You can't get a divorce. You're supposed to be together forever." I felt a lump in my throat, my heart breaking as I saw the pain in his eyes. "I know this is hard to understand, Joshua, but sometimes things don't work out the way we hope they will. But this doesn't mean we don't love you. We love you both so much, and that's never going to change." Emily's eyes filled with tears, her small hands clutching the edge of the couch as if holding on for dear life. "But why, Daddy? Why are you doing this? Did we do something wrong?" Lisa's composure broke at that moment, tears streaming down her face as she reached out to Emily. "Oh, sweetheart, no. You didn't do anything wrong. This isn't your fault. It's just, sometimes grown-ups have problems that they can't fix, no matter how hard they try." "But we can fix it, can't we?" Joshua pleaded, his voice desperate. "We can make things better. Please, don't do this." His words cut through me like a knife, each plea a reminder of how much we were hurting them. I wanted to tell him that everything would be okay, that we could fix it, but I couldn't lie to him. The truth was that our marriage was broken beyond repair, and no amount of trying could put it back together. "Joshua, I wish it were that simple," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But this is something between your mom and me. We've tried to make it work, but we just can't anymore." But I promise you, we're going to do everything we can to make sure you're both taken care of, and that you still have two parents who love you very much." Emily was crying openly now, her small frame shaking with sobs. "But I don't want you to go, Daddy. I don't want things to change." I felt my heart shatter into a million pieces. I wanted to hold her, to comfort her, to promise her that everything would be okay. But I knew that nothing I said could take away the pain she was feeling. This was something she would have to process, something we would all have to process together. Lisa reached out to her, pulling her into a hug as she cried. "I know, baby, I know this is hard, but we're going to get through this together, okay? We're still a family, even if things are going to be different." Joshua's tears had started to fall as well, and he looked at me with a mixture of anger and hurt. "Why can't you just stay together? Why do you have to get divorced? Don't you love each other anymore?" The question hung in the air, and I felt Lisa tense beside me. It was the question we had been avoiding, the one that had no easy answer. "It's complicated, Joshua," I said finally, my voice heavy with regret. "Your mom and we've had some problems for a while now, and we've decided that it's best for everyone if we go our separate ways. But that doesn't mean we don't care about each other. We still want to be there for you, to make sure you have the best life possible." Joshua shook his head, his face crumpling as the reality of the situation hit him. "This isn't fair! I don't want you to leave, Dad! I don't want things to change!" I reached out to him, my heart breaking as I pulled him into a hug. "I know, son. I know this is hard, but I'm not going anywhere. I'll still be here for you, whenever you need me. We're going to get through this, I promise." We sat there for a long time, the four of us huddled together in a tangle of tears and broken hearts. The pain in the room was palpable, a deep, aching sorrow that no words could soothe. But it was something we had to face, something we had to go through in order to move forward. Eventually, the kids' sobs began to subside, and the reality of the situation started to sink in. We talked to them about what would happen next, how I would be moving out, but that they would still see me all the time, how we would still have family dinners, still go on outings together, even if things were different. It wasn't enough to erase their pain, but it was a start, a small glimmer of hope in the midst of the darkness. After the conversation, Lisa and I retreated to our separate spaces, giving the kids some time to process everything on their own. I went to my office, closing the door behind me as I sat down at my desk. The weight of the morning's events pressed down on me, and I felt a deep exhaustion settle into my bones. The hardest part was over, but there was still so much left to do. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer, ready to take the next steps in finalizing the divorce. We discussed the division of assets, the custody arrangements, and the timeline for moving forward. It was a cold, clinical conversation, devoid of emotion, but that was what I needed right now. I needed to focus on the practicalities, on making sure that the process was as smooth and painless as possible, for the kids, if not for myself. After the call, I sat back in my chair, staring at the ceiling as the weight of everything began to sink in. The life I had known was over. The family I had cherished was forever changed. But there was a strange sense of relief in that realization. The worst was behind me. And now, it was time to start rebuilding. Lisa and I had agreed to keep things civil, to work together for the sake of the kids. We weren't going to drag each other through a bitter court battle, weren't going to turn this into a war. There had been enough pain, enough destruction. It was time to find a way forward, to figure out how to live separate lives while still being there for Joshua and Emily. The days that followed were filled with meetings with lawyers, discussions about the logistics of the divorce, and difficult conversations with friends and family. But through it all, I tried to keep my focus on what mattered most, making sure that the kids were okay, that they felt loved and supported despite everything that was happening. Lisa and I sat down with the kids again, explaining the custody arrangements, reassuring them that they would still see both of us regularly, that we were still their parents, even if we weren't together anymore. It was a painful conversation, but it was necessary. The kids needed to know that they were still our top priority, that we were still a family, even if it was in a different form. The divorce process itself was relatively smooth, at least compared to the emotional turmoil that had preceded it. Lisa didn't fight me on anything. She agreed to a joint custody arrangement, with the kids staying in the house with her while I found a new place nearby. We divided our assets fairly, with both of us focused on making sure that the kids were taken care of. There were no heated arguments, no bitter disputes, just a quiet, mutual acceptance of the situation we found ourselves in. As the weeks went by, I found a small apartment a few miles from the house, close enough that I could still be there for the kids whenever they needed me. Moving out was a strange, surreal experience. Packing up my life, leaving behind the home where we had created so many memories. But it was also a necessary step, a way to start fresh, to begin the process of healing. The day I moved out was a quiet one. Lisa and I had agreed that it would be best if the kids weren't there, so she took them to her parents' house for the weekend while I packed up my things. I walked through the house one last time, the rooms echoing with memories that were now tinged with sadness. The life we had built together was over, and as I walked out the door for the last time, I felt a strange mix of grief and relief. Grief for what we had lost, and relief that the worst was behind me. I settled into my new apartment, creating a space that was mine alone. It was small, modest, but it was a place where I could start to rebuild, to figure out who I was outside of my marriage. The kids came over often, and we began to create new routines, new traditions in this new chapter of our lives. It wasn't easy. There were still difficult moments, still days when the pain of the past weighed heavily on all of us. But there were also moments of joy, of laughter, of hope. Lisa and I continued to co-parent as best we could, putting the kids first in everything we did. Our interactions were civil, even friendly at times, but there was always an underlying tension, a reminder of the betrayal that had torn us apart. We didn't talk about the past, didn't rehash old arguments. We focused on the present, on making sure that our kids had the love and support they needed. In the end, the divorce was finalized without much fanfare. We signed the papers, divided our assets, and went our separate ways. There was no dramatic courtroom battle, no bitter fight over custody, just a quiet, mutual understanding that this was the best path forward. The resolution of the divorce was bittersweet. On one hand, it marked the official end of our marriage, the final severing of the bond we had once shared. But on the other hand, it was also a step toward healing, a way to move forward and begin the process of rebuilding our lives. The kids struggled with the changes, of course, but they were resilient. With time, they began to adjust to the new normal, finding a sense of stability in the routines we created. We continued to reassure them that they were loved, that they had two parents who were still there for them, even if we weren't together. As for Lisa and me, we continued to navigate our new roles as co-parents, finding a way to work together despite the pain of the past. It wasn't always easy, but it was necessary. And in the quiet moments, when the kids were asleep and the house was still, I would find myself reflecting on everything that had happened, on the journey that had brought me here. The resolution of the divorce wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the beginning of a new chapter, a chance to find peace and healing in the aftermath of betrayal. And as I looked toward the future, I knew that there was still a long road ahead, but I was ready to face it, for myself, for the kids, and for the chance to create a life that was better, stronger, and more honest than the one I had left behind. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, as I settled into my new life. The initial turmoil of the divorce slowly gave way to a quiet, reflective phase. My new apartment, though small, became a sanctuary where I could finally begin to heal. The pain of Lisa's betrayal was still there, lingering like a dull ache, but it wasn't as sharp as it once was. Time was working its magic, helping me to see things with more clarity, to understand the lessons that life had forced upon me. One of the first things I did in my new life was to establish a routine that gave me structure and purpose. I woke up early every morning, made a strong cup of coffee, and took a moment to sit on my balcony, letting the crisp morning air clear my mind. It became a ritual, a way to ground myself before facing the day. I started going to the gym more regularly, channeling my emotions into something productive. The physical exertion helped to release the anger and frustration that still simmered beneath the surface, and slowly but surely, I began to feel stronger, both physically and mentally. Work became a welcome distraction. I threw myself into my job, taking on new projects, pushing myself to excel. My colleagues noticed the change, commenting on how focused and driven I had become. What they didn't see was that this focus was my way of coping, my way of keeping the darker thoughts at bay. But it worked. The more I immersed myself in my work, the more I began to rediscover a sense of self-worth that had been battered by the events of the past year. Joshua and Emily continued to be my anchor, the reason I got up every morning and kept pushing forward. They were still adjusting to the new reality of having two homes, but they were resilient. Kids have a remarkable ability to adapt, and I made sure that when they were with me, they felt safe, loved, and supported. We created new traditions, like Friday movie nights and Saturday morning pancakes, small rituals that helped to create a sense of stability in their lives. Lisa and I maintained a civil relationship, working together to co-parent the kids as best we could. We communicated regularly about their schedules, school events, and anything else that required coordination. The conversations were always polite, but there was an underlying tension that never really went away. We both knew that the trust between us was gone, replaced by a cold, distant formality. But for the sake of the kids, we kept it together, focusing on their well-being rather than our own unresolved issues. Over time, I began to reconnect with old friends, people I had lost touch with during the years of my marriage. It felt good to rekindle those relationships, to have people around me who knew me before everything fell apart. They were supportive, offering a listening ear when I needed it, but also helping me to look forward rather than dwelling on the past. We would go out for drinks, watch sports, or just hang out, and for the first time in a long time, I began to feel like myself again. But there was still a part of me that felt hollow, a part that had been deeply wounded by Lisa's betrayal. I knew that healing would take time, and that there was no quick fix for the kind of pain I had experienced. So I started seeing a therapist, someone who could help me process everything that had happened, someone who could guide me through the complex emotions that still lingered. The therapy sessions were tough at first. I had to confront a lot of uncomfortable truths about myself, about my marriage, and about the choices I had made. But as the weeks went by, I began to see the value in the process. I learned that it was okay to feel anger, to feel hurt, but that it was also important to let go of those emotions in order to move forward. My therapist helped me to understand that healing wasn't about forgetting what had happened, but about finding a way to live with it, to integrate it into my life without letting it define me. One of the biggest lessons I learned during this time was the importance of self-compassion. I had been so focused on blaming Lisa, on holding on to the anger and the hurt, that I had neglected to take care of myself. Through therapy, I started to practice self-compassion, to forgive myself for the things I couldn't control, and to accept that I deserved happiness, even after everything that had happened. As the months went by, I began to notice a shift in my mindset. The anger that had once consumed me started to fade, replaced by a sense of peace. I began to focus more on the present, on the small moments of joy that life offered, rather than dwelling on the past. I took up new hobbies like hiking and photography, activities that allowed me to connect with nature and capture the beauty of the world around me. These simple pleasures became a source of solace, a reminder that life still had so much to offer, even after all the pain. And then, one day, something unexpected happened. I met someone new. Her name was Anna, and we crossed paths at a mutual friend's party. She was kind, intelligent, and had a warmth about her that immediately drew me in. We started talking, and before I knew it, hours had passed. There was no pressure, no expectations, just two people getting to know each other. For the first time since the divorce, I felt a spark of hope, a glimmer of what could be. We started seeing each other casually, going out for coffee, taking walks in the park, just enjoying each other's company. It was slow, and that was exactly what I needed. There was no rush, no need to jump into anything serious. I was still healing, still finding my way, and Anna respected that. She was patient, understanding, and most importantly, she made me feel good about myself. As the months passed, our relationship deepened, and I began to realize that I was ready to open my heart again. It wasn't about replacing Lisa or erasing the past. It was about moving forward, about allowing myself to be happy again. Anna became a steady presence in my life, someone I could rely on, someone who accepted me for who I was, flaws and all. Introducing Anna to Joshua and Emily was a big step, one that I didn't take lightly. I wanted to make sure that they were comfortable, that they understood that Anna wasn't trying to replace their mother. To my relief, they took to her right away. She was gentle with them, respectful of their feelings, and made an effort to build a relationship with them on their terms. Seeing the kids laugh and smile in her presence filled me with a sense of joy that I hadn't felt in a long time. As my relationship with Anna grew, I also found a new sense of purpose in my work. I took on more responsibilities, mentored younger employees, and even started thinking about the future in a way I hadn't before. The company noticed my dedication, and I was offered a promotion, a recognition of the hard work I had put in during the past year. It was a validation of my efforts, a reminder that I was capable of building something new, something better, even after everything I had been through. But despite the positive changes in my life, there were still moments of reflection, moments when I thought about the past, about Lisa, and about the life we had once shared. I didn't hate her anymore, didn't harbor the same bitterness that had consumed me in the immediate aftermath of the divorce. Instead, I felt a sense of acceptance, a recognition that we had both made mistakes, that we had both contributed to the breakdown of our marriage. I had moved on, and I hoped that she had too. One day, out of the blue, Lisa reached out to me. It had been months since we had spoken outside of matters concerning the kids, and her message caught me off guard. She wanted to meet for coffee, to talk. I was hesitant at first, unsure of what she wanted, but eventually, I agreed. There was still a part of me that needed closure, a part of me that wanted to finally put the past to rest. We met at a small cafe, the kind of place we used to go to when we were first married. She looked different, older, more serious, as if the weight of everything that had happened had left a permanent mark on her. We exchanged polite pleasantries, talking about the kids, about work, about the mundane details of life. But eventually, the conversation shifted to the one thing that had been left unsaid for so long. "David," she began, her voice soft but steady. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for everything. I know I've said it before, but I need you to know that I mean it. I've done a lot of reflecting over the past year, and I realize now how much I hurt you, how much I hurt our family. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted to say it anyway." Her words were sincere, and for the first time I felt like she was truly taking responsibility for what had happened. I nodded, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate that. And I want you to know that I don't hate you. I've moved on and I hope you have too. We both made mistakes and we both paid the price. But I think it's time to let go of the past and focus on the future." She smiled, a small, sad smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm glad to hear that, David. I really am. I've been trying to move on too, to be a better person, a better mother. I just wanted to know that you're okay, that you're happy." "I am," I said, and for the first time I realized that it was true. "I'm happy, Lisa. I found someone new, someone who makes me feel good about myself, and the kids are doing well. That's all I can ask for." "I'm glad," she replied, her voice tinged with emotion. "You deserve to be happy." We finished our coffee, and as we stood to leave, I felt a sense of closure, a finality that had eluded me for so long. We said our goodbyes, and as I watched her walk away, I knew that this was the last chapter of our story. The pain, the betrayal, the anger, it was all in the past now. I had a new life, a new love, and a new sense of purpose. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. As I walked back to my car, the sun shining brightly overhead, I felt a sense of hope for the future. The road had been long, and the journey had been painful, but I had made it through. I had learned to let go of the past, to forgive myself and others, and to embrace the possibilities that lay ahead. I knew that there would still be challenges, still be moments of doubt and difficulty, but I also knew that I had the strength to face them. I had been through the worst and come out the other side, and that gave me a confidence that I had never had before. Life was uncertain, but it was also full of potential, full of opportunities for growth, love, and happiness. And as I drove home, ready to pick up the kids for our weekend together, I knew that I was ready for whatever the future held. I was stronger now, wiser, and more determined than ever to live a life that was true to myself, a life that was filled with love, honesty, and hope.